He raised his hand, the only black student in the room, and the teacher froze, then smirked. "Let's hear from someone who belongs in this class." Laughter erupted. But 20 minutes later, the principal stormed in, holding Tyler's exam, marked 100%, on a test even the teacher failed to solve. And what he exposed next ended more than just careers. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from.
Share in the comments below.
Tyler Green paused at the polished steel door of room 207, the illegible scribbles on his class schedule trembling in his hand. Calculus 3, the pinnacle course, simultaneously a symbol of prestige and an unspoken gatekeeper. The corridor's muted hum faded as he cracked open the door. Inside, 80 students, mostly white, impeccably dressed, shifting in seats, watched him. The professor, Dr. Ethan Langston, mid-explanation on Simpson's rule, froze and stared. Silence stretched like a taut wire. Tyler, his dark eyes calm, lifted his chin. He scanned the chalkboard's muddy curves and highlighted formulas. They weren't unfamiliar. His grandfather taught him these as bedtime stories long ago. Dr. Langston cleared his throat, the authority in his voice cracking. "You must be in the wrong room," he said, his words a scalpel slicing through the stillness. The air thickened. Tyler's heart pounded. Frustration, indignation, and disbelief fused inside him. Not once had he expected to face prejudice this bald in academia's sanctuaries. His thoughts raced. Was it his accent, his skin, his tact? He'd transferred on merit, not pity. No one moved. Some faces looked away. Others watched with curiosity, judgment, or pity. Tyler's classmates exhaled collectively, their breathing shifting the atmosphere. The only sound was a pen clicking on a desk, as if anyone could summon the courage to speak, but no one did. Tyler stepped into the room, his book snug in his satchel. He stood steady, choosing dignity over anger. "I'm in the right place," he said quietly, voice steady though taut. He'd prepared for reactions, professors who spoke over him, peers with awkward silence, but nothing like this. Langston's eyes flicked to the roster pinned by the projector. "You're not listed." Letter by letter, his gaze measured Tyler's presence, skin tone, name, nothing quite fitting the professor's expected profile. Tyler nodded. "I transferred from Northlake University. My package should have reached you." The classroom still held its breath. He unzipped his satchel and handed over an email printout. "Transfer approval, transcript, academic credential." Langston took it, scanning finger-dimmed paper with suspicion. As he skimmed, the room stirred, student whispers curled like smoke. "You must be remaking the curve." Someone got in under affirmative action. The undertow of prejudice leaned in, sharp as glass. Suddenly, Langston's tone changed. "I'm sorry," he said, sounding rehearsed. Then, louder, "If you're not prepared, I suggest you drop this class before you embarrass yourself." He snapped the papers shut, pivoted, and resumed teaching. His chalk poised like a judge's gavel. Conversation closed. Tyler's chest tightened. Heat surged across his face. Not for show, but because indignation burned hotter than injustice. Embarrassed. Not him. Here for a purpose. He inhaled, steadying himself. He had pored over partial derivatives on sleepless nights, and mastered multivariable integrals in a cramped Detroit apartment with his grandfather's voice in his ear. He knew most students in this room had not spent half as many hours with formulas. The difference was counting him outwardly marked as other. He breached the crony silence with quiet clarity. The class prerequisites were met. Dr. Langston. Multivariable calculus. A. Linear algebra. A. My academic record passed every filter. Now eyes darted between him and the professor. Some sympathy surfaced, masked awkwardly by discomfort. One student at the back, a lanky woman in oversized sweater, raised her eyebrows as if telling him, "Good for you." Dr. Langston crumpled the paper, clearing his throat again. Then, unexpectedly, he glared at the board. He wrote a new formula, one Tyler recognized from advanced theoretical calculus. The students leaned forward, thinking perhaps the professor wanted to see how much the newcomer knew. Tyler didn't hesitate. His hand lifted, tracing unknown curves with effortless precision. His pulse steadied as he worked through the problem, one that had once consumed his grandfather's mind. He muttered steps silently, fingernails brushing chalk residue. Students watched, breathless, as each line emerged correct, elegant, instantaneous. From behind, somebody gasped. The board bore his solution, crisp, accurate, groundbreaking in its neatness. A hush fell. Dr. Langston's chalk balanced in his hand, his gavel raised for judgment. Instead of words, he blinked. Then slowly, deliberately, he spoke. "Show me that again." Tyler repeated the entire proof. At the back, one student pulled out a phone. Another leaned toward a friend. The classroom buzzed, but beneath the noise, resentment cracked through. This wasn't the script they anticipated. A black kid standing tall, sharper than their stereotypes. Langston swallowed hard. Chalk paused. His grip tightened around the powdered cylinder. "You copied this from somewhere," he said, toneless, authoritative now, edged with something like fear. Tyler's heart sank, but not with defeat. He felt only a familiar spark of steely resolve. He squared his shoulders, meeting the professor's gaze, steady and unapologetic. "I didn't." His voice was calm, aware that accusation and identity were entwined in a web too snug for comfort. The class exhaled as one, some in disbelief, others in simmering indignation. The professor stepped back, as if the board itself had burned his fingers. Tyler's hand curled into a fist inside his pocket. He thought of Detroit, of nights sweating over proofs with his grandfather, of the pride that came from doing what others assumed he couldn't. The room tasted bitter, sorrow laced with something else. "Awakening," he whispered. "I understand skepticism, but that's not my answer." Langston's throat shifted as he processed this human calm that undeniable proof delivered in silence. A student spoke up finally, voice small but clear. "Can we cover that step again?" Surprise crept through. Langston nodded, chalk resuming its arc, the memory erased, but not forgotten. Tyler lowered his hand, gaze unwavering, knowing something had changed in that room, even if the professor refused to acknowledge it. He sat chest tight but unbowed. The peers around him shifted in their seats, glance sharpened, illusion shattered. Tyler forced a breath, wrapping his identity and ambition tightly around a delicate truth. He belonged here. But before he could settle into the rhythm of the class, Dr. Langston spoke, his tone even, but cold as polished steel. "You should drop this class," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "Before you embarrass yourself." Tyler stared at him. Every muscle inside burned, but the floor beneath didn't quake. He remained seated, mind focused, but the sting of prejudice had found its mark. As the students shifted, curiosity and discomfort tugging them forward, Tyler's mind stilled on one thought. He wasn't leaving. Not now, not ever. The professor tells him to drop the class before he embarrasses himself, setting the stage for a chess game where intellect must meet bias head-on. The marker trembled slightly in the professor's hand. His chalkboard was now a battlefield, and Tyler Green had unknowingly walked into it. Dr. Ethan Langston didn't look directly at Tyler as he scrawled a new equation across the whiteboard. It was an absolute beast. Layers of nested integrals, trigonometric substitutions, and variables twisted like vines. It wasn't from the textbook. No, this one had been hand-picked, crafted, even. The type of question that didn't appear in undergraduate courses for a reason. It was a test disguised as a dismissal. Langston capped the marker and dropped it on the ledge with a snap. "Anyone," he said flatly, not looking at Tyler, but knowing exactly who the question was meant for. Tyler glanced at the board, then at the rows of students watching like an audience, at a courtroom drama. Some leaned back, arms crossed, already assuming the outcome. Others held their breath, their eyes betraying a mixture of hope and dread. He didn't move right away. Instead, he scanned the equation, the way his grandfather once taught him to read sheet music. Not left to right, but in waves. He saw the trap in the second line, the substitution meant to send him down the wrong path, the coefficients disguised to bait him into error. From the back of the room, someone chuckled. Another voice whispered, not quietly enough, "Let's see him squirm now." Tyler stood. He didn't speak. He just walked to the front, calm, casual, his Timberlands silent on the floor tiles. His right hand slid into his pocket, finding nothing but lint and nerves, while his left reached for the marker like a scalpel. The sound of the cap popping off was the only noise in the room. He wrote the first line, clear, efficient, and bold. Then the next, step by step, methodical. The problem was complex, but Tyler moved with the quiet confidence of someone who wasn't solving it for the first time. He was recognizing it, like a familiar song buried under static. Within 1 minute, a murmur ran through the class. 2 minutes in, The silence returned, but this time it was reverent. Tyler finished at 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Then, without a pause, he walked back to the middle and added a second method, an optimization shortcut. A path so elegant it took 2 entire steps off the original solution. The room was completely still. Even the air stopped moving. And then clap. One student in the back. Just one. A slow, stunned clap. It didn't catch on. No one joined in. The lone sound was quickly silenced by an elbow jab from the girl beside him. Tyler capped the marker and placed it back where it had been. Not a flourish. Not a smirk. Just calm precision. Then he turned to face the room. Not in arrogance, but in quiet defiance. He met no one's eyes, except Dr. Langston's. The professor stared at the board. His jaw twitched. His throat moved like he was trying to swallow something bitter. He reached for the marker again, but missed slightly. His fingers found it on the second try. "That's one approach," Langston muttered, though it sounded like defeat. Tyler said nothing. He didn't need to. Langston turned to the class, composing himself. "It's one thing to know answers. It's another to know how you got them. Copying something you've memorized online isn't the same as understanding." Tyler's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. He'd known it was coming, but hearing it still stung. Langston didn't pause. "Let's try this," he said, already scribbling again, faster this time. His tone sharpened, almost offensive. "This next one isn't published. It's not on any forums. In fact, I wrote it myself. Let's see what you do with this one." The new problem was longer. It stretched across the board like a snake, a hybrid of differential equations and obscure identities, something built to collapse under pressure. It wasn't just a challenge. It was a public call-out. Tyler walked back to his seat without a word, but inside a storm swirled. His chest ached, not from fear, but from the weight of being tested not on merit, but on perception. He felt eyes follow him, some sympathetic, others suspicious. They didn't see a classmate. They saw a question mark. Langston tapped the marker twice against the board, a faint smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "No volunteers?" Silence. Then something unexpected happened. The girl from the front row, tightly coiled curls, eyes sharp with intellect, spoke up. "Professor," she said slowly, "can you walk us through how you constructed that problem?" Langston's expression faltered. "Well," he said, voice clipped, "that's irrelevant. The point is to test problem-solving skills." "Of course," she nodded. "But if it's unpublished and constructed by you, how would any of us recognize the pattern, unless we think exactly like you?" A beat of silence. A few students murmured agreement. It wasn't mutiny, but it was curiosity, and it was the beginning of doubt. Langston's grip on the marker tightened. Tyler noticed. He also noticed the slight shift in the room. People weren't just watching him anymore. They were watching Langston too. This wasn't supposed to happen. A few students were quietly scrolling through their tablets under the desk, trying to figure out if Tyler's original solution matched anything online. It did. Another student leaned forward, whispering to the girl beside him. "Did you see the shortcut he used? I've only seen that in grad texts." Tyler heard them, but he kept his gaze down. He was still processing what had just happened. Not the question itself, but the accusation that came with it. The fact that excellence wasn't enough. He had to justify his excellence. Translate it. Prove it wasn't stolen. Defend it against assumptions. Each time. In Detroit, people had questioned whether he could make it out. Here they questioned whether he belonged at all. There was no place between. Langston turned back to the board. "You have until Friday to solve it," he said flatly, "and no collaboration allowed. Submit individually. I'll know if you cheat." The message was aimed at one person. Tyler sat up straight. "Is it all right if I submit mine early?" he asked, voice smooth, eyes steady. Langston turned sharply. "You want to submit it now?" "No," Tyler said. "Tomorrow." Langston's jaw clenched. "Fine." A wave of whispers echoed again. The classroom wasn't a place of learning anymore. It was a chess match, a theater of intellectual warfare, and Tyler was no longer the unknown piece. He was the target. He didn't move the rest of the class. He watched the board, took no notes. The numbers swirled in his head, but so did the tension. He wasn't angry. Not exactly. He was disappointed. Disappointed that he had to defend brilliance. Disappointed that his skin made every answer suspicious. Disappointed that every room he walked into, no matter how elite, felt like a courtroom. The clock ticked slowly. As the class ended, students gathered their things in awkward silence. No one approached Tyler. Some avoided looking at him altogether. Others snuck glances, curiosity burning in their expressions. Langston erased the board forcefully. Chalk dust filled the air like smoke from a fire no one acknowledged. As Tyler stood to leave, he noticed something. A folded piece of paper, under his seat. He picked it up, uncrumpled it. No name, no handwriting he recognized. The note read, "We're watching. Don't get too comfortable." His eyes scanned the room. No one seemed to notice. Or maybe they just didn't care. He folded the note and slid it into his pocket. No reaction, no rage, just the familiar chill of a warning, wrapped in politeness. Tyler walked out the door back straight, heart guarded. But something inside him had already shifted. This wasn't just calculus anymore. It was survival. The professor, threatened and cornered, says, "You copied this from somewhere. Let's see what you do with this one." And the next challenge isn't just academic, it's personal. The campus faded behind Tyler as he walked the tree-lined path back to his dorm. Each step echoed louder than the last. In his pocket, the note burned like a brand. "We're watching. Don't get too comfortable." The words curled in his gut, settling in that familiar place between fury and fatigue. He didn't show it. Never did. His shoulders stayed square, his stride steady. But inside, the wound had reopened. Back in his dorm, he shut the door quietly. No roommate yet. He'd been placed in a single due to space constraints. At first, it felt like a blessing. Now it just felt strategic. Tyler pulled the blinds and sat on the floor. The desk light flickered before settling into a soft glow. He reached for the old tin box buried deep in his suitcase. The lock was broken. It always had been. Inside were papers, notebooks aged with time, corners curled. Ink faded. But the words were unmistakable. Delicate calculations, handwritten graphs, cryptic annotations in green ink. His grandfather's ghost lived in these pages. 8 years earlier. Detroit, winter wrapped the city in gray. The small apartment smelled of kerosene and old carpet. Tyler was 12. His legs folded under him on the floor, a quilt pulled over his shoulders. The lights had been shut off again. Mom worked double shifts, and dinner was often a bag of dollar store rice and frozen spinach. But every night, his grandfather made time for one thing: the language of numbers. "Con boy," Papa Henry would say, his voice hoarse with memory. "Tonight's the hard one." They'd sit beneath the flicker of a single candle, hunched over the kitchen table. His grandfather's breath wheezed from decades of factory dust, but his mind moved like jazz, fluid, spontaneous, untouchable. Tyler's pencil scratched on paper. Slow but determined. "Don't rush to solve it," Papa would whisper. "Learn to feel the problem first." Math wasn't schoolwork in that house. It was legacy. His grandfather had been a public school math teacher in the 1980s, until he was fired. Disciplinary conduct, the letter had said. What they meant: he taught black students calculus when they were supposed to be learning fractions. He refused to stay in his lane. "I showed him infinity, and they gave me a pink slip," he told Tyler once, a half smile behind his eyes. "But they couldn't take what's in here." He tapped his temple. Those nights were sacred. No interruptions, no noise, just silence and symbols. And then came that night. The cold was sharp enough to bite through the walls. Papa Henry laid out a single page in front of Tyler. A problem that spanned the whole sheet, with only a question mark at the end. "What is it?" Tyler asked. Papa Henry didn't smile. He rarely did with this one. "This one's different. Been chasing it for 20 years, he said. "I call it the mirror." Tyler stared. It looked wrong, like it looped in on itself, like the answer wasn't forward. It was hidden. "This can't be solved the normal way," his grandfather whispered. "It's unsolvable, unless—" Tyler looked up. "Unless you think backwards." That phrase became their code, their religion. Think backwards. A rejection of conformity. A belief that sometimes the problem wasn't the numbers, it was the assumption. They worked on it for months. Each night, Tyler would bring a fresh take. Papa would cross it out gently, not in criticism but in guidance. Until one night, Tyler's solution stopped his grandfather cold. His fingers trembled over the paper. "Say that again," he whispered. Tyler walked through it, step by step. Papa leaned back in his chair, eyes damp. "Boy, you might have just changed the game." But nothing came of it. Papa fell sick shortly after. Tyler remembered the hospital halls, how no one looked them in the eye, how the nurse asked if he was visiting the janitor. Papa Henry never came home. And the paper? Tyler folded it into his Bible. The last equation they ever finished together. Now in his dorm, Tyler unfolded that very page. It was yellowed, creased, fragile, but legible, and on it was the exact same structure, nearly identical to the problem Professor Langston had written on the board that morning. The original one. The unpublished one. Tyler's pulse quickened. This wasn't déjà vu. It wasn't similarity. It was the same problem with the same misleading substitution trap, and the same recursive structure. The only difference? His grandfather called it the mirror.
Langston didn't give it a name.
Tyler pulled out his class notes, flipping frantically to the professor's equation. He compared them side by side, line by line. Notations. Even the flawed pathway most would take on first glance. It all matched. Could it be coincidence? No. Langston said he'd written it himself. Claimed it was unpublished. Said Tyler had copied his answer. But Tyler had seen it 8 years ago. Handwritten in green ink. By a black man who died broke, alone, and discredited. He stared at the candlelight stains on the corner of the old page. And then, slowly, realization began to bloom. Unwanted, but undeniable. Either the professor had somehow seen his grandfather's work, or someone had stolen it. But how? How could Langston have access to an unpublished formula written in a ghetto apartment under candlelight? Unless, Tyler flipped through the rest of the notebook. Most pages were marked, some dog-eared, but a few had initials. H.G. Not Henry Green, not his grandfather, but Langston's mentor. He remembered reading in the syllabus. Harold Greer. It hit like thunder. Harold Greer, a former Ivy League researcher. Retired now. But he'd been active during the 80s. Papa Henry had mentioned someone once, a white colleague who took his notes home one day and never returned them. Could it be the same man? If so, Langston may not have invented that problem at all. It may have come from Greer, and Greer may have taken it from Henry Green, from his grandfather. Tyler's hands shook. This wasn't just about one question. This was a legacy stolen. A flame extinguished. A man's genius whitewashed by institutional theft. And now, decades later, his grandson was being accused of copying it. Tyler rose from the floor. He paced. His mind raced. Could he prove it? Could he prove this wasn't a coincidence? He pulled out his phone, searching for Harold Greer's publications. There were hundreds, mostly dry academic theory. But one paper caught his eye, dated 1992. Title, Reverse Flow Integration Patterns in Recursive Systems. He opened the abstract. The language was familiar. The method was identical, and in the acknowledgments tucked away, quiet, forgettable, was a single line. Thanks to HG for early conversations that shaped the initial framework. HG? Henry Green. It wasn't proof, but it was a start. Tyler felt like the air had thinned around him. Rage curled beneath his ribs. Not wild, but disciplined. A rage that came from generations of being erased. His grandfather hadn't just solved that problem. He'd birthed it. And now, Tyler, labeled the cheat, the fluke, was being asked to justify the very knowledge that had been stolen from his bloodline. He stared at the ceiling, eyes glassy. The pain wasn't fresh. It was inherited. But he would carry it, proudly. And he'd make sure the truth was heard. Tyler returns to class the next day, holding his grandfather's original page in his hand, knowing the professor's problem wasn't just unfair, it was stolen. The next morning, Tyler walked to room 27, with his grandfather's page folded neatly inside a textbook, pressed between the covers like a relic. His steps were slow but sure. The cold air had a sharpness to it, but the chill that settled in his chest came from something deeper, a realization that this class was no longer just about calculus. He arrived 10 minutes early. The lecture hall was mostly empty, save for the girl from the front row. Same sharp eyes, same tidy notebook already open. She glanced up, nodded, and returned to her work. No small talk, just quiet respect. Tyler took his seat. For a moment it felt normal, but normal never lasts. By the time the room filled, the energy had shifted. It wasn't loud, but it was buzzing, like static on a radio before a storm. Heads turned toward him, just a bit too long. Conversations dropped off when he walked past. Phones glowed brighter as messages were sent discreetly. Faces ducked low behind backpacks and hoodies. Tyler felt it but didn't show it. He'd been here before, this unspoken theater of suspicion. What he didn't know was that the storm had already gone viral. The post had gone up at 2:16 a.m. on a Reddit thread called Elite Uni Confessions. Title: Black kid in my calc class solves a problem even the prof struggles with, something feels off. Body: not trying to start drama, but how tiff does a transfer student from Northlake walk in and solve the hardest question Dr. Langston's ever given? Deadass looked like he memorized it. And then he added a shortcut. Nah, this doesn't add up. Posting anonymously. But people are talking. Attached was a blurred photo. Tyler at the board, mid-solution. The angle was low, clearly snapped from a phone hiding behind a desk. Within hours, the comments exploded. Affirmative action strikes again. Gotta be AI-generated homework or something. Langston wouldn't get shown up unless someone fed him the answer. They always think they're special till someone checks the receipts. A user named STEMTruths101 posted a long thread filled with speculation and sarcasm, calling Tyler the human calculator from the projects. Another comment read simply, "Watch out, y'all. This one's playing the race card and the genius card." The worst part? The post began spreading outside of Reddit to Discord servers, private Facebook groups, even whispered about in group chats Tyler would never be invited to. By the time Tyler sat in class that morning, the story had already been written without him. Dr. Langston entered 5 minutes late. He didn't acknowledge Tyler. No nod. No glance. He walked straight to the board and began writing. Today's lesson was on polar coordinates. Standard, technical, uneventful. He didn't reference the challenge problem from the day before. No mention of the solution Tyler had promised to deliver. It was as if none of it had happened. Tyler waited through the lecture, watching for the moment to speak. It never came. Langston dismissed the class with a wave of the hand, avoiding eye contact with Tyler entirely. And just like that, the opportunity was buried. Tyler didn't move. He remained seated as the room emptied, his fingers pressing the edge of the notebook that held his grandfather's proof. He debated going up, confronting Langston, but the voice of his mother echoed inside him. Pick your battles, baby. Some wars don't deserve your victory. So he let it go for now. But as he left, he noticed something. A group of students near the exit watched him, not with curiosity, with calculation. One of them, a lanky white guy with thick glasses, smirked as Tyler passed. Then he leaned in to whisper something to the girl beside him. She laughed. Tyler kept walking. That evening, the tension followed him like a shadow. In the library, heads turned again. At the dining hall, trays scraped faster when he walked in. Even in the hallway outside his dorm, 2 students paused their conversation as he approached, and picked it back up only after he passed. He finally opened his laptop, and there it was. Screenshots, photos, comments, his face, his name, his miracle solution, his suspicious shortcut. He scrolled silently, his jaw tight. Each comment landed like a needle in the spine. But it was the memes that broke something in him. One image showed a photoshopped math board with chicken wings and dollar signs, instead of formulas. Caption: when your street smarts kick in during calculus. Another one, Tyler's face edited into the body of a magician, holding a wand. Caption: Wizardry 101, now enrolling. Some weren't even veiled. Langston's gonna lose his grant to this thug. Watch. He closed the laptop, gently. For the first time since arriving, he felt the loneliness creep in, not the kind that came from being new, but the kind that comes from being targeted. He sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He'd done everything right. And still, here he was, on trial without a defense. He thought of his grandfather, of those long nights with graphite-stained fingers, and whispered proofs. Those memories felt too sacred to share, too fragile for public debate. He wasn't afraid of proving himself. He was afraid of how much proof people needed before they'd even consider him innocent. And then he remembered something Papa Henry had once said. They won't say it outright. They'll use other words: too confident, too quick, too lucky. But it all means the same thing. You weren't supposed to be smarter than them. The next morning, Tyler walked the same hallway to his locker.
Nothing looked out of place.
The same buzz of students. The same fluorescent lighting. The same rhythm of shoes, squeaking against polished tile. He turned the lock. 20. The door creaked open. At first he didn't understand what he was looking at. His books were shredded. Pages torn, some sliced cleanly, others in jagged, violent rips. His graph paper was soaked, the ink bleeding into warped spirals. His calculator snapped in half sat like broken bones at the bottom. But what made his stomach flip wasn't the damage. It was the word sprayed in thick black marker across the inside wall of his locker. Cheater. Big, bold. Underlined twice. He stared at it, unmoving. A group of students passed by behind him, laughing too loud, too suddenly. One of them glanced over just for a split second, enough to know. Tyler didn't say a word. He closed the locker, gently, almost politely, and then he walked away, his fists clenched so tight his nails bit into his palms. As Tyler walks to report the vandalism, a new notification buzzes on his phone. It's a private message, no name, just 4 words. We warned you. Stop. The library's east wing was silent, too silent for a Thursday. The study hall, usually buzzing with scattered conversations, and the gentle clatter of keyboards, felt unusually watchful today. Eyes didn't just pass over Tyler, they stuck, like questions waiting to be answered. He sat alone at the far table, back to the glass wall, pencil in hand, notebook open to a half-solved integral. He wasn't working from any textbook. He didn't need one. The problem lived in his mind, already turning, shifting, bending into the form it needed to be. But he could feel them watching. He always could. A table across from him had 3 students, 2 white guys in Letterman jackets, 1 white girl in yoga pants, and a Westridge hoodie. They weren't studying. They were whispering. Every few seconds, they glanced at him, their laughter tight-lipped and calculated. Tyler didn't look up, but he heard it. Affirmative action project. Makes sense. You see the Reddit thread. Bros got cheat codes, not brains. He stayed quiet, still, pencil moving. He'd learned that silence was often his sharpest tool. Not because he didn't want to speak, but because he wanted them to feel the weight of not being able to shake him. A 4th student joined the table. Light brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a gray Westridge Math Society hoodie. I heard Langston setting up a challenge, he said casually, sliding into the seat. What kind? The guy smiled. 1-on-1, oral format, no notes, no tools, just him and the kid. Tyler's pencil stopped. He knew they wanted him to hear. Knew every word was bait. An hour later, he was still sitting alone. His notes had multiplied, 2 pages deep now, clean lines, precise graphs, scratch work that looked more like blueprints than math. But the buzzing hadn't stopped. More whispers. New faces. One girl walked past and dropped her pen beside his chair. She bent down to pick it up, but lingered just long enough to glance at his work. Damn, she muttered. Not to him, to herself. Then she walked off. But others weren't so subtle. 3 students from the back of his calc lecture walked over. Casual, almost friendly. One leaned in over his shoulder. Yo man, he said with a crooked grin. You tutoring or something? Tyler looked up, his eyes calm, unmoved. No, he replied. The second guy, taller, crossed his arms. Then how come you're always done with Langston's assignments before anyone else? You got old tests? Or just friends in high places? The girl with them smiled thinly. You're quiet. That's cool. Mysterious. But people talk, you know. Tyler closed his notebook slowly. I solve problems, he said. That's what I came here to do. The tall one raised an eyebrow. You solve them faster than Langston teaches them. That's not a compliment, the first guy added. That's a red flag. Tyler stared at him. To who? The girl shrugged. To people who've been in the program for 3 years and never seen a first semester transfer outperform the department. It wasn't a conversation. It was an interrogation. He kept his posture calm, unbothered, but inside the weight pushed down like water pressing on a diver's chest. No one asked how hard he worked. They just assumed he was cheating the system, because the system had never made space for someone like him to thrive without permission. I've been doing math like this since I was 12, he said, folding his hands together. I don't need to cheat. I just know what I'm doing. The tall one leaned down closer. His breath smelled faintly of mint and arrogance. Then you won't mind proving it. Word is, Langston wants to set up a little one-on-one. No calculators, no notes. Just you, him, and a whiteboard. Tyler didn't flinch, but his gut tightened. This wasn't a test. It was a trap. That night, Tyler walked across campus to the older side of the library, where the faculty offices were located. The glass windows reflected his own face back at him. Calm, unreadable, distant. His grandfather used to call it game face. He knocked on Dr. Langston's office door once. "Come in," came the voice. Langston was sitting behind a wide oak desk. No smile, no greeting. Just a nod to the chair across from him. Tyler sat. Langston looked up from his laptop. "I assume you've heard." Tyler nodded. "About the oral test?" Langston didn't correct him. "It's standard," he said. "Sometimes we do these with graduate students who come in from different institutions. It's a chance to see where they're really at. In real time." Tyler didn't respond. Langston leaned back slightly, fingers interlaced. "You'll have no notes, no devices. Just you, a marker, and the board." Tyler nodded again. "When?" "Tomorrow. 8 a.m. Seminar room." Tyler stood. But before he turned to leave, Langston added quietly, "This isn't personal, Mr. Green. It's academic rigor." Tyler paused at the door. "No," he said. "It's both." Langston said nothing. As Tyler stepped out into the night, his phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: Evaluation Session. Confirmation. Tyler Green. From Math Dept at Westridge. Time 8 hours a.m. Friday. Location: Seminar room. Note: Session is closed. No observers. No notes. No external materials permitted. He stared at the screen for a long moment, the glow painting his face in cold blue light. He hadn't even been told. Just booked. Not asked. Summoned. The next morning came faster than he expected. Tyler woke before his alarm. Showered. Dressed. Ate nothing. He walked through the near-empty quad with his hands in his pockets, the trees rustling with early wind. The university bell tower struck 7:30. Birds scattered. By the time he reached B204, the hallway was silent. The door was open. Inside, a single board, 2 chairs, a table with a digital recorder set up, its blinking red light the only movement in the room. Langston stood at the front, arms crossed. "No introductions. Let's begin," he said. Tyler steps into the empty seminar room, alone, no calculator, no notes, just him, Langston, and a blinking red recorder that's already been turned on. The seminar room was too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't just sit in the air, it listens. Tyler stood still just inside the threshold. The whiteboard loomed at the front like a canvas waiting for a public execution. Dr. Langston motioned to the seat without speaking. Tyler didn't sit. He dropped his backpack gently by the wall and faced the board, waiting. Langston moved to the side table and hit the recorder. Beep. Recording started. 7. Evaluator Professor Ethan Langston. Subject: Tyler Green. Topic: Calculus 3 Oral Proficiency Assessment. Langston turned toward him. "No notes, no calculator, no eraser. This is a clean board. You'll work through each problem verbally and write the final step. I will not repeat myself." Tyler nodded once. Understood. Langston picked up a marker. His movements were stiff but deliberate. The first problem appeared on the board, a complex integration with parametric variables and nested limits. Tyler stared at it for no more than 5 seconds. "Recognize it?" Langston asked, his tone lined with suspicion, not curiosity. Tyler stepped forward. "Yes. The bounds can be simplified before substitution. That'll cut the steps in half." He began. No hesitation, no stutter. Every variable, every conversion spoken clearly. It wasn't just correct. It was fluent, like a native speaker reciting a familiar prayer. When he reached the final expression, he didn't bother looking at Langston. He simply said "no." Langston didn't respond. He erased the board with clipped strokes. The second problem came faster, a vector field problem involving divergence and curl. Again, Tyler scanned it, this time slightly longer, but only because it was messy. He started slow, breaking down each concept, rephrasing it as he worked. Partial derivative of the third component with respect to x is 0. That tells me the field is conservative. So now I check for a potential function. Langston's pen froze mid-note. Tyler wrapped the solution in under 2 minutes. Langston cleared the board without a word. By the time the fourth problem was solved, an optimization problem disguised as a boundary issue, Langston's shoulders had slumped. Not dramatically, but enough for someone like Tyler to notice. The professor was unraveling. Tyler stayed stone-faced, not out of arrogance, but survival. He'd grown up having to be twice as prepared for half the benefit. In this room, he wasn't just solving equations, he was undoing generations of assumption. Langston wrote the fifth problem. This one was different. Longer, broader. It wasn't a straight shot, more like a riddle cloaked in numbers. A disguised double integral with misleading formatting. Tyler stared for nearly 30 seconds. His fingers twitched. The lines didn't scare him, but he sensed the trap. It was meant to confuse, not test. Still, he found the pivot point, the one assumption it relied on. And when he found that, everything else folded. The key here, Tyler said slowly, is that the outer integral doesn't actually affect the variable being manipulated in the inner function. It's decorative. If you solve the inner structure first, the rest collapses. He stepped to the board, wrote 3 lines. Langston's assistant, who had sat silently behind a laptop this whole time, stopped typing. Tyler finished the problem and stepped back. He wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't smiling. He looked at Langston, voice steady. "Are we done?" Langston didn't speak. He stared at the board as if it had betrayed him. Tyler didn't wait for an answer. He turned, picked up his backpack, and walked out without a word. The hallway was empty. No students, no chatter, just the squeak of his soles and the quiet hum of overhead fluorescence. Tyler didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow. Winning a war you never wanted to fight had that effect, especially when you knew the war was far from over. He exited through the rear doors, the morning sun catching on the glass as it slid across his skin. His fingers dug into the strap of his bag, grounding him. And then, just as he reached the end of the steps, he felt something shift. His backpack felt lighter. Too light. He dropped it to the bench beside him and unzipped it. Inside, everything was there. His folders, his pens, his worn-out copy of Black Mathematicians, and their legacy. But wedged between his notebook and the side pocket was a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. It was thick. No creases. Printed. Not handwritten. He unfolded it. "You will never belong." That was all it said. No signature. No threat. No demand. Just a sentence. But it landed like a verdict. Tyler stared at the words. His heartbeat thudded in his ears. There was no denying what it meant. No misreading the message. This wasn't about math anymore. This was a line in the sand. He looked around. No one nearby. Just the wind and the silence. He folded the note slowly and slipped it into his notebook. Not to keep it, but to remember it. As proof. As fuel. This wasn't fear. It was confirmation. That even when you broke every assumption, surpassed every expectation, they'd still move the finish line. Because the race was never about ability. It was about permission. And Tyler Green wasn't asking for it. As Tyler closes his notebook with the note tucked inside, his phone buzzes again. This time with an anonymous email attachment. A blurry image of him inside the seminar room, mid-problem, and the subject line reads, "Exposed. This is how he's faking it." Tyler sat frozen on the dorm bench, the anonymous email still open on his phone. The subject line read, "Exposed. This is how he's faking it." The attachment was a blurry screenshot. Him standing at the seminar board, mid-sentence, marker in hand. Someone had filtered it, zoomed in and drawn red arrows around his wrist, accusing him of wearing a smart device. A caption in bold red font screamed, "Notice the watch, not allowed during testing." What's he hiding? Tyler blinked slowly. He hadn't worn a watch. Ever. It was a shadow. A trick of light. But facts didn't matter. Not to those who were already convinced they had the truth they wanted. He closed the phone, not from fear, but from exhaustion. The attacks were mutating, getting more clever, more coded. First the jokes, then the whispers, then the locker. Now fake proof. It wasn't just a smear campaign anymore. It was a chessboard. And someone was moving pieces fast. Back in his room, he closed the door and locked it. The air felt stale. The blinds stayed down. He reached again for the old tin box in the closet, the one he hadn't touched in weeks, not since his first night on campus. The lid creaked open, revealing the faded journal, tucked beneath old family photos, and a funeral program, with Papa Henry's full name, Henry Levi Green, 1947. Tyler pulled the journal out slowly, reverently. Its cloth cover was frayed, the edges browned with time. Inside were pages and pages of equations, notes, diagrams, and something else memory. Papa Henry's handwriting danced across every page in dark blue pen, always slightly slanted, always meticulous. This wasn't schoolwork. This was survival disguised as genius. Tyler had never read it cover to cover, only flipped through it as a kid, following numbers he didn't yet understand. But now, he read with intent, with purpose. What he found made his breath catch. On page 37, a formula annotated speculative, nonlinear convergence under rotating reference frame. It looked familiar. Strikingly so. He flipped through his own notebook, past homework and lecture notes until he found it. The recent assignment Langston had discussed in class. The one he'd said was still under peer review. Line by line, the structures matched. Not exactly, but undeniably. His grandfather had worked out a variant of Langston's research, years ago. A solution Langston hadn't yet fully proven, and Papa Henry had already finished it. In this worn, forgotten journal, buried under decades of dust and racism, Tyler sat back, stunned. There it was, the truth no one would believe. A black man in Detroit, fired for pushing too far, had quietly solved problems the university now praised as groundbreaking. And no one knew. No one but Tyler. He turned the page, and something fell out. A folded sheet, smaller than the journal, with a diagram and a note scribbled in smaller handwriting. Ask Greer why this wasn't cited. Tyler's eyes widened. Greer.
Dr. Harold Greer.
Langston's mentor. The man who'd once reviewed a public school program that Papa Henry participated in before being forced out. But Papa used to mention the old man who visited once and left with my best work. But Tyler had thought it was just bitterness, never proven. Until now. The implication was staggering. Greer had taken his grandfather's research, and now Langston was continuing it. Uncited, unacknowledged, untouched by history. This wasn't academic theft, it was generational erasure. He closed the journal gently, like placing a body in the ground. Then he pulled out his phone and started searching. Dr. Harold Greer, emeritus faculty, published over 200 research papers, retired 10 years ago, still listed as consulting mentor on the department website. Tyler's eyes narrowed. His stomach turned, not from fear but from realization. This wasn't just Langston's prejudice, it was systemic, inherited, reinforced. Papa Henry hadn't just been silenced, he'd been used. His legacy, his intellect, his discoveries, whitewashed, repackaged, and praised when someone else wore the nameplate. Tyler stood. The exhaustion in his bones burned off like fog in sunlight. This was no longer about survival. It was about restoration. He spent the next hour scanning every page of the journal, carefully, page by page, into his laptop. He cataloged the pages with timestamps, cross-referenced formulas, and saved them into 2 different encrypted folders, one on a cloud server, one on an external drive. Then he wrote one sentence in a fresh Word document, saved as the file's title. My grandfather solved the problem your professor is still struggling with. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment longer before he added a second line beneath it. And I'm going to make sure the world knows. But then something else caught his eye. Something tucked in the back flap of the journal. A name. Not his grandfather's. Not Greer's. It was written in small cursive, barely visible in the light. E. Langston, Summer Audit. Tyler's chest seized. Langston. He had handled this journal before, back when Tyler was just a child. Back when Papa Henry still believed someone might listen, if he just showed them what he knew. He must have handed it to Greer. Greer passed it on to Langston. Maybe for peer review. Maybe for consultation. And then, silence. Tyler couldn't breathe for a moment. His vision blurred with the weight of the realization. Langston knew. He had seen this journal. He had seen these formulas, and now he was pretending Tyler had copied his work. The irony crushed him. It wasn't just that his grandfather had solved the problem. It was that Langston had already read it, and pretended it was his own. The rage was quiet, but it filled every corner of his body. He wasn't just fighting for his name now. He was fighting for a legacy that had been stolen, buried, and pawned off by people who wore respect like a badge but moved like thieves. He picked up the journal again, and held it to his chest. Not like evidence, like memory. And then, without flinching, he whispered under his breath, "Let's see you deny this." As Tyler prepares to email a scanned page from the journal to a trusted math professor in another department, he receives an auto notification. Access denied. You've been flagged for academic misconduct. Email privileges temporarily suspended. Tyler stared at the message on his laptop screen. Access denied. You've been flagged for academic misconduct. Email privileges temporarily suspended. His jaw tightened. His throat stayed still. For a long moment, he didn't move. Just blinked. Once. Twice. The cursor on the screen pulsed like a heartbeat. He wasn't shocked. He was expecting it. What stung was how swiftly it had come, right after he tried to share the journal. It was like someone had been watching, waiting for a trigger. He wasn't being accused for a mistake. He was being preemptively silenced. His first thought was, Langston. His second, how much does he know I know? 15 minutes earlier, Langston had been in his office, sipping coffee from a cracked ceramic mug etched with Westridge Faculty of Distinction. The mug had a hairline fracture, running through the word distinction, a perfect metaphor. The email he typed was formal, cordial, a masterpiece of academic concern. Subject were concerns regarding recent assessment anomalies. Dear colleagues, I hope this note finds you well. I am reaching out to raise a concern that has developed over the past few weeks regarding one of my new students, Mr. Tyler Green, transfer Northlake University. Mr. Green has exhibited extraordinary problem-solving abilities, solving high-level calculus proofs in record time, and offering alternate methods not typically encountered at this level. While this in itself is impressive, it raises questions regarding the source of his knowledge. As we are all committed to maintaining academic integrity, I felt it necessary to inquire whether Mr. Green may have had outside assistance or access to unpublished work, either via tutoring, unauthorized notes, or digital tools. I have initiated a quiet flag on his account, purely as a formality while we assess. Please refrain from discussing this matter with students, as it is currently under internal review. Sincerely, Dr. Ethan Langston, Department of Mathematics, Westridge University. There were no accusations, just questions, just enough to stain. And the BCC field was filled with 32 faculty members across departments, across tenure levels. Like a virus engineered to replicate silently. He clicked send, and with that, the game had escalated. Back in his dorm, Tyler's phone buzzed. He opened the notification, fingers ice cold. Your academic file has been flagged. Please visit the Office of Academic Integrity at 2:30 p.m. for an urgent consultation. Do not miss this appointment. No explanation, no opportunity to prepare. He looked at the time. It was 1. He was supposed to be in his next class in 10 minutes. He didn't go. By the time Tyler arrived outside the Office of Academic Integrity, the afternoon sun had dimmed behind a low ceiling of clouds. The building itself was modern but cold, glass and stone, that looked more like a courthouse than a university facility. Inside, the walls were bare, sterile, sanitized. At the front desk sat a woman, who didn't look up as she handed him a clipboard. Fill this out. Sit down. Tyler glanced at the form. It had one line. I acknowledge I am here for an academic misconduct consultation. He hesitated, then signed it. They made him wait 19 minutes. 19 minutes of chairs that creaked too loud, of glances from passers-by through the glass door, of questions he couldn't answer, not because he didn't know, but because the entire premise was rigged. Finally, a short woman with a Westridge pin stepped out and called his name. Tyler Green? He stood. She didn't smile. Follow me. They led him into a small room. 3 people sat at the table. A panel. 1 man in a navy blazer who didn't introduce himself. 1 woman with a laptop already open, typing before he sat down. And 1 older black man, gray beard, lined face, who looked at Tyler with something between worry and weariness. The room had a digital clock on the wall. It ticked louder than it should have. The man in the blazer began. Mr. Green, thank you for coming. We've received a report raising concerns regarding the originality of your work in Professor Langston's course. Specifically, the nature and speed of your solutions have prompted questions about whether the material was independently produced. Tyler didn't blink. He'd spent his whole life waiting for this moment in different forms. The woman cut in. We're not accusing you. This is a preliminary inquiry. But the report did mention your oral test. Professor Langston noted that your approach mirrored methods he'd only recently shared with his mentor, Dr. Greer. That raised eyebrows. Tyler opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. The trap was elegant. Langston had painted him as too advanced to be believable, but not advanced enough to be original. The older black man finally spoke, voice soft. We just need to hear from you. In your own words, how are you arriving at these solutions? And have you had access to any private academic material from this or other institutions? Tyler leaned forward, steady. My grandfather taught me calculus when I was in middle school. He was a public school teacher in Detroit, fired for teaching ahead of the curriculum. We worked on advanced math together every night. I have his journal. He wrote formulas I'm just now seeing in textbooks.
They didn't respond.
I've never cheated, he added. And if you want proof of how I think, ask me any problem you want. Right now. Out loud. The man in the blazer cleared his throat. We're not doing a test today. Of course not. They weren't interested in proof. They were interested in doubt. That was the point. The woman spoke again, quietly. This time, we're placing a temporary academic hold on your account. You can continue attending classes, but your grades are being reviewed. Until then, please refrain from contacting faculty directly regarding this matter. Tyler stared at her. What does that mean? I can't speak to professors? I can't defend myself. The man in the blazer replied, it means you'll have a chance to explain during the formal review board hearing. Next Friday. 7 days. 7 days of silence. 7 days of rumors. 7 days of damage. The older man watched Tyler's reaction closely. Tyler met his eyes. There was no pity in them, only recognition. As he stepped out into the hallway, the air felt denser. He didn't cry. He didn't break. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something more dangerous than anger. Stillness. That heavy, choking stillness that comes when the people in power don't scream or shout. They simply write your name down and close the door quietly. Tyler didn't go back to his dorm. He walked the campus for nearly an hour, his steps echoing through buildings that now felt foreign, cold, performative. Everyone smiled here, but no one saw him. He stopped under the same maple tree where he'd first taken a call from his mom after getting accepted. He had told her, they're finally going to see what I can do. He now understood how naive that was. It was never about what he could do. It was about who they believed should be doing it. As Tyler sits beneath the maple tree, his phone buzzes again, this time with a text from a blocked number. They'll never listen to you. But they will listen to me. Meet me at the campus archives. 11 p.m. Come alone. Tyler hadn't answered the text right away. They'll never listen to you. But they will listen to me. Meet me at the campus archives. 11 p.m. Come alone. There were a dozen reasons not to go, starting with the fact that the sender was anonymous. But the voice in his head, his grandfather's voice, reminded him that silence was how systems stayed intact. If someone wanted to talk, especially about this, he'd listen. But before he could move toward the truth, the university had other plans. He was called in the next morning. Again. This time not to the Office of Academic Integrity, but a private boardroom inside the administrative tower, reserved for sensitive discussions. Not even students on the verge of expulsion were sent there. Tyler entered alone. The room was glass-walled, exposed. It was built to make people feel seen, but not heard. Inside sat 4 figures. 3 white men, crisply dressed in tailored suits. 1 older, 1 silver-haired, 1 younger but clearly powerful, and 1 black woman. She sat on the far end of the table, arms folded, expression unreadable. Her Westridge pin was the only hint she worked for the university. Tyler was directed to a single chair at the head of the table, far enough away to make him feel like a visitor in his own defense. No one offered water. No one smiled. The man in the middle, silver hair and sun-spotted hands, cleared his throat and began. Mr. Green, let me start by saying this meeting is informal, but its implications are not. We are here to discuss not only your recent performance in Dr. Langston's course, but concerns about your background, preparation, and the claims you've made about external influences. Tyler said nothing. He let the man keep talking. The younger man leaned forward. You've made extraordinary leaps. That's not in question. What is in question, he said, tapping the table for emphasis, is how a second-year transfer student, with no prior mentorship records, no research affiliations, and no departmental references, could solve a problem that stumped tenured faculty. The older man nodded as if confirming the logic. Mr. Green, he said carefully, genius doesn't exist in a vacuum. Even Einstein had Einstein, who taught you these methods, who shaped your thinking. Tyler looked directly at him. My grandfather. The men exchanged glances. Polite confusion. The kind that's really dismissal dressed as curiosity. Tyler continued. His name was Henry Green. He was a public school teacher in Detroit. He taught calculus in a basement when they told him to stick to fractions. He was fired for it, but he didn't stop teaching. Not to me. The younger man gave a thin smile. And this grandfather of yours, do you have any of his work? Tyler reached into his satchel, placed it carefully on the table, and pulled out the folder. His grandfather's journal, annotated and copied. He slid it across the glass. The room fell silent. The older man picked it up first, flipping through slowly. At first his brow creased in skepticism. Then something shifted. He stopped on page 37. "Wait," he said under his breath. The younger man leaned over. "What is it?" But the older man didn't answer. He turned to page 43, then page 50. His face paled. "These aren't student-level derivations. These are decades ahead." Tyler nodded. "He wrote that in the night." The older man looked up. "Some of these aren't even in published journals yet." "I know," Tyler said calmly. "Langston's latest paper." The man whispered to himself. "He's referencing half of this." The younger man stood slowly, walked over to look. The tension changed. Not vanished, but reoriented. Now it was less about Tyler, more about what his presence threatened to reveal. The third man, the one who'd been silent, finally spoke. "If this is real, and it holds under scrutiny," he said, his voice slow, careful, "it means your grandfather anticipated core theorems we've only just begun to publish." Tyler said nothing. He didn't need to. He just sat there, letting the weight of his grandfather's intellect push into the center of the room like gravity. But not everyone was moved. The younger man circled back to his chair. "That still doesn't explain how you got here. No scholarships, no mentorship, no internships. We don't just see raw talent like this emerge out of nowhere." Tyler leaned forward. "You don't see it because you don't look for it." The black woman spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but razor sharp. "And when it does show up in your classrooms," she added, "you call it suspicious." The room turned to her. She met Tyler's eyes briefly. Just long enough to let him know she saw him. Not his grades. Not his file. Him. The older man cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Well, that's not..." But she cut him off. "Let's not pretend the question isn't racial. Because when it was a white freshman solving proofs early last year, he was hailed as a prodigy. No one asked if he'd had help." Silence. No one replied. Tyler sat up straighter. "Professor Langston saw this journal in 2007. He said suddenly. The men looked back at him. "I found his name scribbled in the back flap. Summer audit. My grandfather gave this to someone named Dr. Greer for review. Langston worked under him back then." He paused. "That means he's seen this before." The younger man narrowed his eyes. "Are you accusing Professor Langston of academic theft?" "I'm saying he's pretending something is original that isn't," Tyler replied. "And he's building his credibility on the silence of someone no one ever thought would fight back." The older man looked uncomfortable now, but the younger one smiled. "Mr. Green," he said, "even if your claims were true, they're almost impossible to verify, unless there's corroborating testimony or time-stamped publication. This is just anecdotal." Tyler leaned in. "That's why you've already decided I'm not believable, and that's why you'll find a way to discredit this too." The older man opened his mouth.
"Then stop."
The black woman closed the journal. "We need to escalate this to the Research Ethics Committee," she said firmly. "Not just academic integrity. This is a bigger question." The men bristled, but she held her ground. Tyler stood. Before he left, he looked at all of them one last time. "You don't have to believe me, but I promise you, before this semester is over, the truth won't be optional anymore." And with that, he walked out. 10 minutes after leaving, Tyler receives an email on a backup account he hadn't used in years, from a sender named HG. The subject line reads, "We need to talk. Langston took more than you think." The email arrived in Tyler's inbox late Tuesday night, from an administrative assistant he'd never met. Subject: invitation to present. Think Tank Thursday. "Mr. Green, you have been selected to present at this week's Think Tank Thursday, Westridge's flagship seminar for showcasing exceptional student-led academic innovation. We encourage personal style and non-traditional topics. Format is 15-20 minutes followed by open Q&A. Faculty, students, and visiting scholars will be in attendance. Date: Thursday. Time: 4. Location: Brennan Lecture Hall 1. We look forward to hearing from you." Tyler read it 3 times before leaning back in his chair. It didn't make sense. No explanation, no nomination trail, no heads up from Langston, the seminar's longtime coordinator, just an invite. Was it a trap? A setup? Another performance test masked as opportunity? His instinct told him yes, but his purpose told him to go anyway. On Thursday afternoon, Tyler walked into Brennan Hall wearing black jeans, a Westridge hoodie, and scuffed sneakers. No blazer, no tie. He wasn't dressing up for respect anymore. He was walking in with it. Students filed into the room. Faculty too. some chatting casually, others eyeing the flyer with his name on it, unsure what to expect. In the second row sat Professor Langston, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. 3 seats over sat the dean of the math department. Beside him, a visiting scholar from Princeton, a black woman in her early 40s, braided hair, glasses perched on her head. She looked intrigued, not skeptical, just curious. The room held about 80 people. Most seats were filled. At 4:01 p.m., Tyler stepped up to the podium. The hum of chatter faded. No applause, no warm welcome, just silence. He plugged in his flash drive. A single slide lit the screen behind him. Decolonizing calculus, from fields to formulas. Tyler Green. A few eyebrows lifted. Someone in the back exhaled loudly, like a warning. Tyler ignored it. He looked at the room and spoke. "I'm not here to impress you," he began. "I'm here to correct something." He paused. "My grandfather was a black math teacher in Detroit, who was fired for teaching calculus to middle schoolers. He taught me everything I know, by candlelight, on paper scraps, in a housing complex that didn't even have working elevators." He clicked to the next slide, a scanned photo of his grandfather's notebook. Handwritten formulas. Notes in blue ink. He wrote this in 1994. Some of these theories didn't appear in academic literature until 2010. No one cited him, no one gave him credit, because he didn't have letters behind his name, or access to peer-reviewed journals. But he had genius. He turned to the crowd. "You don't know his name, but you've read versions of his work, through people who never acknowledged him." Langston shifted in his seat. Tyler continued. He walked the audience through a reimagined history of calculus. Not just its development through Newton and Leibniz, but the indigenous contributions to number theory. African mathematical systems dating back to 300 BC. The overlooked brilliance of black minds, whose work was either appropriated or erased. He broke down equations on the projector in real time, showing how his grandfather's solutions predated certain theorems now praised in journals. Every formula came with a story, a timeline, a silence that had once buried it. He wasn't just proving a point, he was resurrecting a legacy. And slowly something changed. The room leaned in, even Langston. Tyler ended with a slide that simply read, "The question isn't, how did he get so good? The question is, why did you assume he couldn't be?" The audience sat still. Then, slowly, applause began. Not explosive, but real. The kind of applause that comes from people processing truth they hadn't planned to confront. The Princeton scholar was already nodding before it ended. When Tyler stepped away from the podium, she stood up and met him halfway. She didn't shake his hand. She hugged him. "I've waited years to hear this talk," she said quietly. "This needs to be published. Immediately." Langston didn't move. He stared straight ahead, stone-faced, but the air had changed. He wasn't the center of the room anymore. Tyler was, and everyone knew it. Tyler stepped outside, the crisp air biting at his skin. His heart was steady, but his thoughts raced. It had gone well. Better than he'd imagined. But he knew it wouldn't end here. For people like him, nothing ever ended at the applause. As Tyler checks his phone, another email arrives. This one from a faculty listserv he isn't supposed to be on. It reads, "Faculty concern. Should we be encouraging unverified claims in student seminars?" And the sender? Dr. Ethan Langston. Tyler hadn't even made it back to his dorm before his phone buzzed again. And again. And then it didn't. At first it was a few retweets. Some quotes from his presentation. "Genius doesn't need permission. Decolonizing calculus is long overdue." Then someone posted a 2-minute clip from his closing remarks, shot from the third row. His voice was clear, his posture unshaken, his words carried fire. Within 20 minutes it had crossed 10,000 views. By midnight it had 250,000. Black Math Genius trended by sunrise. He woke up to a barrage of notifications. Instagram DMs, LinkedIn connection requests, even emails from high school teachers he hadn't spoken to in years. Most of it was support, messages from black students across the country. "Bro, I thought I was the only one going through this. You just said what I've been too scared to. They've been trying to silence me too. Respect." And from teacher, "I showed your clip to my AP Calc class this morning. What you're doing is historic. Keep pushing." But fame, even accidental, has a price. By noon the backlash arrived. It started with a Reddit thread titled, "Who really wrote the formula Tyler Green presented?" The top comment read, There's no way he developed this alone. I bet Langston handed it to him to promote diversity. Just watch, this'll blow up and embarrass the department. Another post. Shared across forums. Princeton's being manipulated. You can't say anything without being called racist. What if he's just really good at memorizing? Then, the podcast dropped. Title, The Merit Myth. How Identity Politics Are Undermining Academic Integrity. Host Cole Delaney. Ivy Talk Weekly. 800K subscribers. The episode went live at 3:15 p.m. and hit the top 20 on Apple Podcasts by dinner time. Cole's voice was slick, controlled, and steeped in dog whistles. Today we're talking about a student named Tyler Green. A gifted kid, no doubt, but there are real questions about where his work is actually coming from. Unconfirmed reports suggest some of his key insights may have been lifted from an unpublished draft by a tenured white professor who, for political reasons, cannot speak publicly. He never said Langston's name. He didn't have to. Tyler listened to the entire episode in silence, sitting on the floor of his dorm. He didn't cry, didn't shout. He just felt hollow. His truth was now a debate. His talent was now suspicious. His story, a weapon in someone else's agenda. He closed his laptop, leaned his head back against the wall. The hum of the mini fridge was the only sound in the room. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying. Fame doesn't protect you when you're black and brilliant. It exposes you. The next day, campus wasn't the same. People didn't whisper now. They stared. A few smiled politely. A few nodded. But many looked at him with that expression that lands somewhere between curiosity and contempt. Not anger. Not disbelief. But something worse. Doubt masquerading as neutrality. Langston never acknowledged him again. Not in class. Not in hallway. But Tyler felt the shift. Even students who had once said hey in passing now kept their eyes on their screens. As if the same kid they had watched solve the impossible suddenly became too much of a liability to be associated with. The only person who still met his gaze, Professor Olivia Barnes, the visiting scholar from Princeton. She stopped him outside the library late one afternoon, her voice calm but purposeful. "You stirred something, Tyler," she said, and not everyone likes having their silence interrupted. He nodded slowly. "I wasn't trying to be loud," he replied. "I was just trying to be seen." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were, and that's why they're coming for you harder." She handed him a card. Her number was handwritten on the back. "Anything happens. Anything. You call me." That night, Tyler called his mom. Her voice cracked through the phone, her joy dancing between pride and anxiety. "I saw your video, baby. You sounded just like your grandfather. Like you were standing for something bigger than you." He smiled. "I was." But her tone dipped. "I also saw the podcast," she admitted. Tyler went quiet. "I'm not worried," she added quickly. "But just promise me you're watching your back." "I am," he said. But they both knew that wasn't entirely true. The next morning she found something in the mailbox.
No return address.
Just an envelope, cream-colored, sealed. She opened it slowly, curiosity giving way to a sinking weight in her chest. Inside was a photo of her front door. Their home in Detroit. On the back of the photo, written in permanent black marker, "Sit down." No name. No threats. Just the command. Simple. Chilling. She didn't call Tyler right away. She stared at the photo for nearly 15 minutes, her hands trembling. Then she took out her phone, snapped a picture of it, and sent it to him with no text. Tyler's phone lit up on his desk as he prepared for a study group. He unlocked it, saw the image, and froze. Just as Tyler picks up his phone to call his mom, he gets another notification, this time from an unknown number with a video file attached. It's grainy surveillance footage of someone slipping a folded paper under the door of the university provost's office. The file is named Journal Pages. Tyler Green. Tyler stared at the grainy surveillance clip on his phone. The timestamp was real. The angle was from the east hallway camera near the provost's office. One only staff would know how to access. The footage showed a figure in a gray hoodie, head down, slipping an envelope under the door. The video ended with a freeze frame on the envelope's corner, a handwritten label in capital letters. Journal Pages, Tyler Green. Tyler's mouth went dry. Only 3 people had access to that journal. One of them was dead. One was Tyler. And the last was the man who claimed it never existed. He barely slept that night. His mother's text came just after midnight. "I'm fine. Don't worry about the photo. I've already filed a police report." You just keep doing what you're doing, son. But how could he not worry? The threats weren't just aimed at him anymore. They were reaching his roots, his family, his foundation. And now someone had leaked parts of the journal, the same one he'd scanned and protected, directly to the university's top office. But not to help, to control the narrative. The next morning, campus was electric. Tyler hadn't even made it through the cafeteria line when a friend from his statistics class tapped his shoulder. "You see Reddit yet?" Tyler blinked. No. The guy slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a new post on the Westridge Confessions thread. Langston's history just dropped. Not all geniuses are innocent. Attached screenshots of a decades-old internal report. Allegations. Suppression. Grade manipulation. Multiple anonymous students claiming that their research had been withheld, reassigned or rephrased by Langston in publication. And buried in the third image, 2011 complaint, alleging the use of student work for personal academic advancement. Closed without review. Tyler scrolled in silence. His fingers shook. These weren't rumors. These were buried truths, resurfacing like corpses. An hour later, the university issued a formal statement. "We are aware of historic allegations involving Professor Ethan Langston. As a matter of protocol, we do not comment on ongoing internal investigations. We remain committed to academic integrity and the safety of all our students." It was the university's way of saying, "We've known, and we've ignored it. But now that it's public, we'll pretend to care." Students flooded campus Twitter with responses. "How long has this guy been protected?" The same professor accusing Tyler Green of plagiarism. "Say his name. Louder." Tyler was right. He's been stealing work. Ask around. By late afternoon, Tyler found himself standing outside the third floor of the library, a place few undergraduates ever went. It was known as the archive wing, dusty, dimly lit, and mostly untouched. He'd gone there after a strange message appeared in his encrypted inbox. "If you want to understand what really happened to your grandfather's work, look in the 1993 faculty audit files. Basement copy was removed. But there's a microfiche backup upstairs. Storage box D9. No name. No context. Just direction." Tyler followed it. He asked the library assistant for access. She looked surprised but handed him a temporary clearance card without asking questions. Maybe she'd seen the clip. Maybe she believed him. Or maybe she was just tired of seeing the truth buried. Inside the archive room, time moved differently. Old catalogs sat on metal shelves. Microfilm reels lined the cabinets like relics of a forgotten war. It took him 27 minutes to find box. When he opened it, the scent of aged paper rose up like smoke. Inside were memos, audit trails, and evaluation notes from 3 decades ago. He flipped carefully. Pages turned. Nothing. More paper. Then near the back he froze. A folder labeled Faculty Evaluations, Langston E. External Work Review. He opened it. Inside was a scan of a signed document, dated June 1993. A recommendation letter from Dr. Harold Greer, suggesting Langston be awarded a postdoctoral grant for his revolutionary framework on recursive proofs and field-based abstraction. But in the appendix, something was off. There was a hand-scrawled note attached. Source material provided by HLG, not original to EL. Review was fast-tracked. Request internal ethics clearance. Tyler stared at the initials. Henry Levi Green. His grandfather. The full weight hit him like a wall. Langston had submitted his grandfather's work. He hadn't just seen the journal. He'd used it, as his own. And someone somewhere had noticed. But instead of investigating, they buried it under bureaucracy. The note had been tucked into an appendix no one was ever meant to read. Tyler sat back in the chair, his heart thudding in his ears. It wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a theft that had built Langston's career. One lecture, one grant, one published paper at a time. And the university knew, even if only in fragments. He snapped photos of every page, labeled the files, backed them up to 3 drives, and as he placed the folder back in the box, he whispered aloud, almost to himself, he stole everything. As he left the archives, his phone buzzed again. A private number. No caller ID. He answered. A voice low, calm, and familiar spoke on the other end. "You're not the only one he buried, Tyler, but you might be the one who can pull us all back into the light." Tyler's grip tightened. "Who is this?" But the line went dead. No reply. Just silence. Tyler returns to his dorm and finds a letter slipped under his door. No return name. Just a single sentence inside. Meet me at the campus chapel. Midnight. Bring the journal. Come alone. Room 314 didn't look like a courtroom. It looked like a classroom that had been hastily stripped of learning. Bare white walls, a semicircle of folding chairs, and a single wooden podium awkwardly placed at the front. But make no mistake, this was a trial. Tyler stepped inside wearing a navy hoodie, black slacks, and quiet determination. He wasn't there to perform. He was there to testify. On the far end of the room sat the academic review board. 6 faculty members, 3 men and 3 women, all in business casual as if this were a departmental meeting and not a crossroad in a student's life. To the right sat Professor Ethan Langston, pressed suit, polished glasses, a folder thick with prepared statements. He didn't look at Tyler. He didn't need to. To him, this hearing was a formality, a scripted form of control. What he hadn't counted on was how much the script had changed. The board chair, Professor Mendel, cleared her throat. This hearing has been called to examine the integrity of academic work submitted by Mr. Tyler Green, following concerns raised by Professor Langston regarding originality, authorship, and procedural conduct. Mr. Green, you may begin with your opening statement. Tyler didn't hesitate. He stood. My name is Tyler Green. I transferred to Westridge because I believed in the idea that intelligence didn't need a pedigree to be validated. That belief was tested the moment I walked into room 2. He paused, then added, this isn't about one solution or one test. It's about a pattern, a legacy. Langston shifted in his seat. Tyler reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. The scans of his grandfather's journal, the microfiche notes, and the ethics recommendation. He placed them on the table in front of the board. I'd like these entered into the record. Langston stood next. His voice was smooth, calculated. Mr. Green is undeniably talented, but genius without guidance often leads to appropriation. My concern, and the concern of several colleagues, is that some of his work bears a striking resemblance to unpublished drafts I've been developing over several years. While no formal theft is being alleged, he added quickly, we must protect the integrity of this institution. A masterstroke, sound reasonable while implying theft. He returned to his seat. Tyler didn't look at him. He looked at the board and waited. The hearing proceeded in segments. A teaching assistant testified first, Langston's own assistant. I was in the room during Tyler's oral test, she said, nervously glancing toward Langston. He didn't use notes, didn't cheat, solved the problems faster than I've seen from grad students. Mendel nodded. Did his methods match Dr. Langston's unpublished work? She hesitated. No. They were different. More efficient, actually. Langston didn't flinch. Next came a professor from the History of Mathematics department, called by Tyler. He pointed to several equations from the journal and matched them with time-stamped scans from research archives. This formula was recorded in Mr. Green's grandfather's handwriting in 1993, he said, gesturing to the screen. Langston's published version appeared in 2012, nearly 20 years later. Langston interjected. I had no knowledge of that journal until last week. Tyler's voice cut through. But your name is in it. Summer 2007. Backflap. And you reviewed it during a mentorship with Dr. Greer. Langston's mouth opened, but no sound came. The room held its breath. Professor Barnes from Princeton testified via video. Her voice was steady, eyes focused. Tyler Green's presentation showed originality, rigor, and lineage. His work reflects the kind of pattern recognition that can't be memorized. It has to be internalized. She paused. And honestly, I've never seen someone this young defend generational scholarship so fearlessly. Langston stared straight ahead, but his pen stopped moving. Finally, Tyler stood for his closing statement. I was never supposed to be here, he began. Not just in this room, but in these halls. He scanned the faces watching. They said I was too fast, too confident, too correct. And when they couldn't discredit the math, they started discrediting me. He raised the journal. This is my grandfather's legacy. A man who taught math by flashlight because they turned off the power to our building. Who was fired not for being wrong, but for refusing to teach small. He looked directly at Langston. You didn't just erase me. You erased him. And now you're afraid the truth will cost you something. He paused. Maybe it should. Mendel adjusted her glasses. Mr. Green, do you have any final exhibits? Tyler nodded. I'd like to play one audio clip. It was recorded 3 weeks ago during a meeting I wasn't supposed to hear. He clicked his phone. Langston's voice filled the room. He's good. Too good. Makes me look obsolete. Silent. Tyler added. I wasn't supposed to hear that, but it told me everything I needed to know. Langston's face drained of color. The board whispered quietly among themselves. Professor Mendel looked at Tyler. We'll need time to deliberate. She turned to Langston. You as well, Professor. They were dismissed. Tyler stepped into the hallway alone. He didn't feel victorious. He felt unburdened. For the first time since walking onto campus, he wasn't shrinking himself to fit the room. He had made the room fit him. But just as he reached for the stairwell door, his phone buzzed. One message. One line. From the same encrypted account that had led him to the microfiche. Langston wasn't working alone. Check the math department's funding files. Tyler looks up and sees Professor Langston walking down the hallway, not toward the faculty lounge, but into a private elevator marked restricted, admin use only. The announcement came at 10:42 a.m. on a rainy Thursday. A campus-wide email with the subject line, temporary suspension of Professor Ethan Langston. Statement from the provost's office. Tyler read the first line 3 times before it sank in. Following an internal review of long-standing allegations and new evidence presented during recent proceedings, Professor Langston has been placed on administrative suspension pending further investigation into ethical misconduct and academic fraud. The email was short, polished, painless, but the ripple it caused? Immediate and seismic. By noon, the campus was in motion. A coalition of student organizations, most of which had never shared a common goal, called for a walkout. Their flyer spread like fire through group chats and dorm hallways. Stand for truth. Stand for Tyler. Walk out at 1 p.m. Location, Mathematics Building. We demand transparency. We demand legacy recognition. We demand restitution. Tyler didn't organize it. He didn't even know who did. But at 12:57 p.m., when he stood by the third-floor windows overlooking the quad, he saw a crowd forming below. Dozens of students, umbrellas and raincoats, standing shoulder to shoulder. At 1 p.m. sharp, they walked, and the sound of their footsteps echoed louder than any protest chant. Langston never showed his face. His office door was locked. His name removed from the hallway display by evening. But that didn't mean the system let go easily. Tyler still hadn't received any formal apology. The university issued a tepid statement. We are committed to ensuring a fair and inclusive academic environment for all students. We deeply regret any disruption caused by recent events. No names, no accountability, just regret. Like truth was an inconvenience, not an obligation. The next day, Tyler was called into a meeting with Dean Pritchard. The office was the same: mahogany desk, floor-to-ceiling windows, a coffee machine no one used. But this time, the tone was different. Pritchard didn't lead with a question. He led with an offer. We'd like to extend you a full research fellowship, he said, hands folded. Access to department labs, faculty mentorship, conference travel stipends, your own research cluster. Tyler blinked. It was the kind of offer usually reserved for doctoral candidates. The kind of opportunity students built entire careers waiting for. But Tyler didn't answer. Not right away. Why now? He asked. Pritchard didn't flinch. Because we should have supported you from the start. Tyler tilted his head slightly. Or because I proved you wrong publicly. A long silence. Pritchard sighed. We failed you, he said evenly. We failed your family. And we want to make it right. Tyler leaned forward, his voice calm but razor-sharp. Making it right would mean acknowledging that this didn't just start with Langston. It started with who you believed, with who you gave the benefit of the doubt, with the fact that my grandfather died, erased from the very department he helped build from the shadows. Pritchard looked down. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was necessary. Because for the first time, Tyler wasn't looking for acceptance. He was demanding justice. He didn't say yes. Not yet. He told Pritchard he needed time. He walked out of the building with the same satchel he had carried on his first day, the one Langston told him to put away. But it felt different now. Lighter. Not because the weight was gone, because he knew how to carry it.
That evening, a package arrived in his mailbox.
No tracking number. No return address. Just a thin cardboard envelope with old-style twine binding. Inside was a letter. Thick, ivory paper. Embossed with gold lettering. Massachusetts Institute of Technology. At first Tyler thought it was about him. But then he saw the name.
Mr. Henry L. Green.
He stared at it, breath frozen. The envelope had been redirected from an archive address, the type that universities send out when they update historical records, grant posthumous recognition, or process academic restitutions. His hands trembled as he pulled out the letter. It read, "Dear Mr. Green, after a review of unpublished contributions submitted by a third party, we wish to inform you that your work on recursive integration and nonlinear field abstraction has been verified as an original contribution to the field of applied mathematics. While you were not credited at the time of publication, our committee has voted unanimously to cite your work in the upcoming revision of the university's 1994-2004 departmental history and include your name among our contributors of historical significance. We regret the delay, and we are grateful your work has finally been seen." Tyler sank into his chair. He read the letter again and again. It wasn't for him, but it was about everything he had fought for, everything they had buried, everything they had hoped would disappear with time. He folded the letter slowly, and for the first time in weeks he cried. Not because he was hurt, but because his grandfather had finally been acknowledged, not just as a man who taught from the margins, but as a mind who moved the world, even when it refused to move with him. As Tyler wipes his face, his phone buzzes with a new message. The sender, Princeton faculty admin. Subject, guest lecture request, Department of Mathematics. But the email ends with a line that stops his breath. "We would also like to formally invite you to submit your grandfather's journal for permanent archival and authorship validation. His legacy deserves a home here." The conference hall was unlike any space Tyler had ever entered. Vaulted ceilings, marble floors, the kind of lighting that made even genius feel staged. The 72nd Annual National Mathematics Symposium had drawn minds from across the globe. Professors from Oxford, researchers from MIT, tech leads from Silicon Valley, and graduate prodigies from universities Tyler had only read about. And him, a black kid from Detroit with a notebook that had changed everything. He stood backstage, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the podium. The sound technician adjusted his mic. The moderator whispered, "The run of show." But Tyler didn't hear them. His eyes were on the folder tucked beneath his arm. The final typeset version of the theorem he had revised, authored and now published, co-credited to one name the world had almost erased: Henry Levi Green. The moderator's voice boomed through the hall. "Please welcome our next speaker, Tyler Green, from Westridge University, presenting his paper, Recursive Infinity and the Forgotten Framework, a Proof of Legacy in Calculus." Applause filled the space, steady but reserved, until Tyler stepped forward, and then the clapping grew louder. Not just polite, but anticipatory. They had heard the story. They had seen the clip. But now, they were here for the math. Tyler stood beneath the spotlight and took a breath. "My grandfather once told me that equations are just language. With a better memory," he began. "They remember who used them, who was denied access to them, and who had to build them from scratch, in silence." He clicked to the first slide, a scan of the original journal page. "I am not here today to prove I'm brilliant," he said, voice steady. "I'm here to prove we've been brilliant, and ignored for too long." The presentation moved like a storm, structured, precise, and grounded in history. He broke down the layers of the theorem with clarity, showed its lineage, drew parallels between his grandfather's forgotten annotations and modern systems in quantum modeling and fluid dynamics. But he didn't stop at numbers. He told stories of students erased from authorship, of public school prodigies passed over for recommendations, of black mathematicians whose work was extracted, but whose names never made it past the footnotes. And then, in a moment of quiet command, he clicked to his final slide. A photograph, black and white, faded, of a man hunched over a small table lit only by candlelight, scribbling formulas on the back of a cereal box. Henry L. Green, mathematician, mentor, my grandfather. The silence was heavy. Then, slowly, the crowd rose. One row, then two, until the entire hall stood in recognition, not just of the proof, but of the person behind it. After the session, faculty swarmed him. From Yale, Stanford, even a quiet delegation from Oxford, who asked for reprints. But Tyler didn't linger in praise. He stepped into a quieter corner, pulled out his phone, and sent a single photo to his mom, of the room mid-standing ovation, with the caption, "He made it, ma. They see him now." She replied instantly. "And they'll never unsee him again." The next day, Princeton officially confirmed the journal's archival status. It would be housed in the Rare Manuscripts Library, under a special collection titled The green papers, contributions in calculus from the margins. It wasn't just a win. It was a rewriting of credit, of authorship, of who gets remembered, and who never fades again. Tyler declined a Westridge Research Fellowship. Instead, he accepted an offer to co-lead a new initiative at Princeton, the Legacy Lab, a program designed to find, support, and archive contributions from underrepresented students in STEM. He gave lectures, built curriculum, but more than anything, he listened. 2 stories like his, kids from places like his, brilliant, sharp, and 1 false accusation away from silence. Months later, he stood before a freshman seminar and said, "You don't need permission to belong in the room. And you don't owe anyone your genius on a silver platter just to prove you're worthy." The students wrote it down like gospel. But one girl, quiet, hoodie up, notebook full, looked up and whispered, "This sounds like something someone once told you." Tyler smiled. It was. On the final page of his published paper, there was a single dedication. To every black mind told to sit down, stay quiet, or prove twice as hard, just to be called equal. This theorem belongs to all of us. They told him to leave the classroom. Now the world is learning from him. No one should have to be twice as brilliant just to be seen as equal. If this story made you angry, or reminded you of someone who deserved better, don't scroll past it. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart, because staying silent only protects the ones who caused the pain.